Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Location Powers Big Data. Location Powers is a name that OGC uses for a series of events that where we want to focus on a given topic and technology strategy that needs a little more attention, needs to be reached out to the broader community. This is a public event. We invited broadly across the community in order to get folks from all over the place involved. So it's good to see everybody here. Today's topic is Location Powers Big Data. We are focused on big data as one of the topics that have come out of the technology strategy development that we work with the OGC Board of Directors, the OAB, the OGC community at large. And so to focus on big data, several people have said big data, that's pretty old, isn't it? In some ways, yeah, sure. It started in the 60s with big, computer houses with raised floors and all kinds of stuff, right? Of course, there's a whole lot more modern stuff, and we want to focus on, in particular, how open, loosely coupled concepts relate to big geodata. So in that sense, I think we are advancing a topic area that is very relevant to today, and we should have a good session. So our sessions today are 6, starting, so if you didn't get a handout, we do have a few handouts of the overall sessions. There's 6 of them, 2 of them before the break, a massive one right before lunch. Then actually analyzing might be the big one. The one right after lunch will be a challenge to keep you all awake, but if you are interested, thank you. Good to see you. And then so session 1 is the opening and keynote, so we've got an overview topic. Session 2, 3, and 4, obviously kind of a set of workflows about obtaining big data, maintaining and making the data accessible. So session 3 includes that, how is it organized and how is it accessible kind of topics. Session 4 then is analyzing big data, so getting towards what is the value that can be achieved or obtained from doing analysis on data at scale. Session 5 is a panel. Mark Reichert, our president, will chair that, and the idea is to have a discussion about what are the applications of big data, and begin to talk about where are we going from here? What are the outcomes of this discussion that make sense for open, loosely coupled developments type thing. And at the end, rapporteur reports the next steps. So for each session, there'll be a session chair and a rapporteur. The session chair will obviously chair the session. Rapporteur will record his and her particular notes about that, and at the end, we'll get a report out of each session by the rapporteurs, which forms the beginning of our report of the workshop. And then we'll talk about next steps. Maybe we'll have some exciting announcements about really cool things people want to do. And that'll wrap up the day. So we're here till the end of the day. It's like 5 o'clock, I think, 4:45, because we have to be out of here by 5 o'clock. So that is the overall session plan. Session 1 is essentially 2 things. One, me giving you a welcome and an opening, and then in a minute, Dr. Jibo Sanyal from Oak Ridge National Labs will give us location and powers in a shifting big data landscape talk. So there you go. But let me set the stage with respect to some of the themes. You may have noticed this graphic that the team that put together the panel, and if I try to the workshop, let's see. So Denise McKenzie, who's not here, is on part of that. Dan Getman, who's here. Hey, Dan. Chuck Hazel is here. I thought I saw him. Yeah, Scott Simmons, Peter Bauman, and who am I missing? I know I'm missing somebody. It was a panel, the group that put it together, and they'll slap me around. I feel real bad, right? But, so you can see that on the webpage. In any case, they put together kind of these themes. And this is a couple of quotes that were in the press release that went out to kind of give us this perspective that we're not really just looking at big data and cloud-based hosting. We're looking at what does it mean to be open in that environment. So innovations on cloud-based global imagery archives that provide vast amounts of geospatial data along with tools to extract useful information from that data. That's really cool stuff. But innovations of how loosely coupled petabyte scale archives based on open standards will result in rapid geospatial information product creation at any scale. That's a really good phrase. The key thing here is, there's petabyte scale archives are becoming not commonplace, but more readily available. A petabyte is something that is about the size of a car garage now, maybe headed towards the size of a backpack. So a petabyte is something you can actually kind of put your arms around now. And despite how many petabytes you have in your archive and the processing that's close to that, you're still going to want somebody else's data that's somewhere else. So this whole discussion about open access and interaction and loosely coupled is really the key to what we think from an open standards environment we can benefit the community from. Let's put this in a little bit of perspective with respect to historical perspective. So I just finished this book called The Innovators, written by Walter Isaacson. Anybody else read this book? He was the editor of Time magazine for many years. He also wrote a biography of Steve Jobs and a variety of other things. But it's a tremendous survey of a variety of topics, beginning with Ada Lovelace, who was, a poet's daughter back in the, and she's the first software programmer, is the way it's described, right? So, and it goes through all the technology associated with building up of what we now take for granted as as an internet and information community environment. In fact, it doesn't really hit big data. It kind of stops short of that. It stops with the web. And so in some ways, I'll give us a challenge. Let's write this next chapter, right? Let's write the chapter of this next book, the revision of this book that says big data, and then Ada Forever becomes chapter 13. So some really cool quotes out of this book about innovation. So the digital age may seem revolutionary, but it was based upon expanding the ideas handed down from the previous generation. So we talk about innovation as happening as an instant, as I've got a new device. It's so revolutionary, it just happened, it came out of nowhere. Well, not so much, right? We know that it takes a while for those instances to happen. We need to have a lot of discussion and a lot of development, a lot of individual technologies that then come together into what we call an innovation event, an innovation moment. And so we need that kind of perspective. Innovation is most vibrant in the realms where open source systems compete with proprietary ones. So this is an old quote. The admiral, the lady admiral, who just got a building named for her in the Naval Academy. Somebody's got Hopper, yeah. So Admiral Hopper was the first open source programmer. And this was back in the 60s or so. And so it gives a real perspective about what open source means. We realize it's very vibrant now, but it's been around for a long time. And it works best when there's both open source and proprietary. So innovation requires having at least three things: a great idea, engineering talent to execute it, and the business savvy plus deal-making moxie to turn it into a successful product. So that's where we need to end up and think about. We're one part of this equation, and the things that we do and develop over the next years coming out of this event can lead to supporting a new chapter in the Innovators book. So, open approaches, this is my cut. Loosely coupling while enabling competition, identify open strategies and interfaces, services that keep processing close to data, right? Because data moving is a big deal. Portability of data across clouds, information model semantics and encodings are real key to this. Jeff, this is kind of one of your themes about as you move into the cloud, having those encodings and data models become ever more important is something you've emphasized from a NOAA perspective to me in the past. So, algorithm and workflow abstractions, processing and workflow control from web clients, metadata for describing algorithms, and then the proliferation of proprietary APIs. Wonderful technologies, APIs. Another great new innovation. APIs happened, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. So, but there's been a lot of discussion about the proliferation of APIs, and that's a good thing, right? Having APIs that allow you that access to the data is a wonderful thing. What we're seeing with the proliferation, though, tends to be a degradation of interoperability. Everybody's writing their own API with their own semantics, their own syntax. None of it works together. There's loss of information and the like. So how can we help that? How can we reverse the degradation of interoperability? So that's my introduction. Any questions? We want to be very interactive, and we've allowed for the time in the program to do that. So we do have, like I say, the time to do that. Any questions about the scope, the purpose, rewriting history? Come on. You're all up for that today, right? Did you sign up for that when you came in the door? So,
one API that governs them all.
One API that governs them all. Yeah. So one of the other things that the innovator book talks about is the innovation happens at the intersection of technology and art. So one API that rules them all. There must be a book somewhere that talks about one API that rules them, one ring that rules them all. Yes, sir, in the very back.
If you want your metaphor in a pair, MATLAB, proprietary, Python, open, and crowdsourced. 10 years on, which is going to win? Give up on APIs, go to programming languages.
Give up on APIs?
Yes.
And go to programming languages.
The next generation, the E2 millennials, are all going to be coders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why would you buy into an API that says I have to do it your way?
Yeah. Ben?
I'm sorry. Programming languages use API. The C,
What does P stand for?
the standard C library, for instance, is an API for both the system functions and the C programming language. The original source of APIs was to encapsulate common functionality for programming languages. So we're not taking away from it, but just ship it back where it originally came. Please.
Yeah, so I think, I'm one of the organizers and I'm presenting, so I'm not asking the question, but thinking about the kind of questions we're going to be asking. And I think there's an interesting paradigm between what's open and what's easy and what's loosely coupled and what can't be open and what has to be charged for and things like that. I mean, I'm representing industry, or at least part of industry in this conversation, so
very good.
We're trying to make sure that everything we do can be coupled in with these things, but we also can't just give everything away for free. And so how do we find that balance? And I think there's enough of a variety of folks who are using a variety of technologies to help at least talk about that and think about where those connections can be made.
Yes, sir.
As I would say, I'm sure more than one of us are like me. Government contractors sometimes have to work in environments where they like things done a certain way. I'm hoping to gain some enough information out of this that I can eventually convince some people that, especially for GIS, open source is definitely the way to go, even in these government systems where they're so scared about security and such like that. Open source.
I think you'll see some examples of open source being used in government applications with proprietary code of the same. I think it'll be a mix. We'll see that through today. So that's a very good. If you don't get that answer, come at the end of the day and say, "I didn't get my answer," and let's talk about that again. So we just discovered that we started a GoToMeeting when it was a GoToWebinar. So that was my mistake. So we have to redo this one too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, bear with us for just a minute.
You said it was only here.
Do a refresh maybe. Or just load it. And then we're drawing it on.
Yeah, so
Try registering for the. What? Hey, Mickey. Where is it listed that I can, is there a link that I can go to?
So I'm started as doing, yeah.
Hey Greg,
yes.
got a surgeon can help tie those ears back a little bit.
Is a problem with him?
You're insulting his look?
Well, he's actually a vet, but I think he'll take care of it.
He just has to pass it.
Welcome to the webinar. You have entered as an organizer and may now speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press the Start Broadcast button on the Go to Webinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast.
Yes.
Do you want that?
Well, no, I mean, that's,
Right, I do.
I know you did. Just jam.